So I would get a lot of remarks about that. The prohibition of listening to music as well. We're not told that directly, but we're told, it brings about certain things in us. It's not good, etc. In Islam, and we are encouraged to listen to the Quran or anashid. The anashid is, it's the Quran sung without musical instruments, except for the doof. And so we are actually pushed towards a rigorous practice without being told. And then there are extremely violent remarks about the Jews. I mean, clearly here we are being told, soon we will be at war against the Jews and the fags. And then we're explained all of this. It's because, you see, we're explained, for example, the story of Muhammad, the prophet, when he was betrayed by the Jews, etc. We will also be reminded of the war with the village, etc. Who is it who is mentioned either in the Sunnah or in the account of the life of the prophet or in the Quran, in certain surahs? So all of this, I'm going to realize very quickly that it's extremely violent. And at the same time, we can feel this affection from them. And there I told myself, be careful. We need to be very cautious. I'm not going to think that I'm smarter than her and that I can get through this. I was really afraid of indoctrination. So I started having sessions with a psychologist. So every week I would see a psychologist to talk about it. Because even at university, I couldn't talk about it. That is to say, my teachers were not ready to hear this kind of discourse. And so to set some boundaries, I had to see a psychologist. So I would share everything, which then allowed me to take a certain distance from what I was experiencing, knowing that these people who teach in these places, they are women who are very educated. Some have degrees in higher education, like social work. Some are qualified as nurses, a retired nurse in marketing. So these are people who have a high level of education, who know how to handle language very well, and who also know how to create a connection with the people who come to see them. So because yes, please, among the women who came to frequent these places, I also asked the women the question finally, why did they come there to learn? Because they gave lessons. They gave lessons in the Quran. They gave lessons of ethics, dogma, and spiritual foundations for young girls between 12 and 18 years old. But then it expanded. And so among these women who came there, I asked them the question, why did you come here? What are you looking for in this place? What do you find in this place? And the majority of women said, because this was between 2014 and 2017, my survey, most of the women said, but do you hear what's happening in the media? What they say, there are young people who are leaving for Syria and Iraq. They are radicalized in our streets by preachers, and we don't want our children to leave and become radicalized. So we decided to come here to learn about Islam, the real Islam, and then to teach it to our children or our teenagers. And actually, I realized after a few months that these women didn't notice they were becoming radicalized. They didn't realize it because it happened gradually, meaning it was hammered in all day long in every class. And then it was validated by this writing in the Quran. The Prophet said it. And since everything that is said in the Quran and everything the Prophet said must be applied, you can't question it. So these women ultimately accepted it without anyone questioning it, since they told us you don't question it and you can't question it. So if you question, it means you are questioning the words of Allah. And so finally, this is the beginning of the exit somewhere from Islam. And so that was really, but in every class we were brought a story, and so it ended for you.
Fadila, this investigation, did you leave?
At what point did this group, so I finished my research after 6 months and submitted my final project to the university, which wasn't perfect. I think there were things that could be questioned from a writing perspective. But fundamentally for me, there was something that was extremely important that I observed. It's this radicalism, this indoctrination of these women, but it also allowed me to go to other places in Brussels. I wasn't satisfied. It was an entry point, if you will, this place, which allowed me to go to other places that no one has access to or very few people do. And so in the end, when I presented my work to these professors, I obviously had to self-censor on quite a few passages. And then clearly there were questions, professors who didn't want to know anything and who told me that that's maybe a bit too much. So I felt that there were elements that I had to remove. So I self-censored. In the end, I got an average grade, just enough to pass. But there was a conflict between the person, my supervisor, and the person who was present, who was supposed to be a specialist in Islam, but who here loved. As I saw that for me, I felt that there was something being projected. So I still decided to keep in touch with these women. So I continued to infiltrate this place until 2017. And in 2017, I had to step away because I started to become more public, giving training sessions, etc. In 2019, I started to publish articles knowing that when I first entered, the number of women frequenting this place was around 100, with about 12 to 14 young girls at the spiritual gatherings. The following year, there were more than 40 young girls at the spiritual gatherings and over 200. I should mention that afterwards it grew to over 400 people frequenting this place. And the women who learned in those places were trained to then spread out to different mosques across Brussels, but also outside of Brussels. So now they are really mobilized, and we can see them within the university or in the entire work environment, in all sectors of the workforce in Belgium.
So indeed, it clearly shows everything you are describing to us. Fadila, it really shows us how indoctrination happens, how the progression also takes place. It spreads. And it's a very difficult indoctrination indeed that is very hard to counter, at least to resist when you're on the inside anyway. I would like to ask you a question that's a bit more political, because if we look around Belgium, in the Netherlands, for example, the far-right leader Geert Wilders has just reached a coalition agreement to lead the country, and he is known for his quite radical positions against this Islamist threat. How do you assess his diagnosis and his actions? It seems like he sometimes says a bit of the same thing as you. How are you doing?
In this situation, I think, first of all, that there are a lot of personalities in different countries, whether it's the Netherlands or our country, from the right, even people of parties that are considered far right, obviously have made these diagnoses talking about Islamism, fundamentalism, radicalism, and denouncing all of this. My problem, if you like, is that the left either does not talk about it, can, or even completely evacuates it and censors it, and on the contrary, even goes rather collaborate with the Islamists. For me, that's really what causes me the most problems.